March 1945, 8 months after D-Day. Allied forces had landed on the Normandy coast. They had liberated France, driving the Nazis back and back. Now, the Allies had fought their way into German territory, the Ruhr. But the war was not over quite yet.
There's one big hurdle, the Rhine River. It's a barrier into the German heartland. It's going to be very well defended. This is really the last chance the Germans have, their last-ditch defense.
2 American infantry divisions were preparing to launch their attack. Field Marshal Bernard Law Montgomery was there. So was Supreme Commander Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Winston Churchill comes in from London. They all want to be there for the moment that the Ninth Army crosses the Rhine River. The concern is that there's going to be a huge number of casualties. One soldier said he thought the Rhine River would run red with American blood.
10 miles away, in the district of Viersen, on the banks of the Rhine, another American unit was also preparing to carry out its orders.
And I got to tell you, these folks are doing something that's top secret.
The soldiers of this unit knew they would not be firing a single shot. Their job was show business.
They're using inflatable tanks and trucks. They're using sound effects. They're impersonating officers. It sounds like something out of a novel, out of a comic book, but it's totally real. And it's a U.S. Army group called the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, and we know them today as the Ghost Army.
The soldiers in this unit had a mission, but it was not to fight. Their mission was to put on a show for an audience who wanted to kill them. The Ghost Army specialized in every aspect of theater. Sound, lighting, props, costumes, scripted drama, acting. The intended audience was the German army, and the enemy soldiers had to believe it was all absolutely real. Potentially, thousands of lives rested on the Ghost Army pulling this off.
And if there's a crazier war story than that, I don't know what it is.
I'm Helena Bonham Carter, and for BBC Radio 4, this is history's secret heroes. True stories of deception, acts of resistance, and courage from World War II. The Ghost Army.
My name is Rick Beyer. I am president of the Ghost Army Legacy Project. I'm an author and filmmaker. I made the Ghost Army documentary and co-wrote a book, so I guess I'm all things Ghost Army.
For Beyer, the story started 18 years ago. A friend got in touch.
And he said, I've met this woman. Her uncle was in this insane World War II unit. She just found out about it. She thinks somebody should make a documentary film about it. And would you be willing to meet with her? So we met at a coffee shop.
Their coffees were soon pushed to the edge of the table, forgotten. Instead, Beyer poured over 3 ring binders the woman had brought, her uncle's wartime scrapbooks.
These scrapbooks were filled with photographs and works of art and documents.
Straight away, Beyer could see that this was no ordinary military story. He began to contact veterans named in the scrapbooks.
And then, as I started to meet the men who served in this unit, I really was kind of blown away by them. People like Bernie Bluestein.
Hello, I'm Bernard B. Bluestein, better known to my friends as Bernie. Let's see, now I was born August 13th, 1923. I don't like to say this, but I think I'm 99 years old. I served in the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops. We were known as the Ghost Army.
The United States had joined the war in 1941 after the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
I was only 19 years old, and I was going to art school. This was in 1943. I can still remember that date. I noticed on the bulletin board at the art school, it said that the Army was looking for young artists that they could use for a new outfit that they were forming that would be doing camouflage work. There was two words on there. It said, non-fighting. I wasn't a very aggressive person. I wasn't a macho person. So I decided, hey, this would be good for me.
I am Seymour Nussenbaum, 99 years old. Ever since I was maybe 6, 7 years old, I took to drawing and doing artwork. And as I was growing older, I decided I wanted to be in the art field.
After high school, Nussenbaum had gone on to study art at the prestigious Pratt Institute in Brooklyn.
And I finished my first half of the first year when I was drafted into the Army.
Like Bluestein, Nussenbaum was drawn to the idea of using his creative skills for the war effort.
It applied a certain amount of artwork and imagination. Instead of just being a soldier and being told what to do all the time, you would have at least a little bit of ability to use your own talents.
In the summer of 1943, Bluestein and Nussenbaum were among a group of young men sent to a military training base in Maryland. Soon, they became friends. The men were taught how to use paint, colour and texture to make objects blend in with their surroundings.
And what we did was camouflage. Just, paint the different vehicles, the different colours and that sort of thing.
While these men were painting tanks, the US Army was pitching an idea to use their skills for much greater dramatic effect.
Deception's really old in military history. I mean, you go back to the Trojan horse. You can go back before the Trojan horse. But this was really something new.
The US Army was creating, in effect, a travelling circus.
A mobile, multimedia, tactical deception unit that was literally capable of acting like a theatrical roadshow, where we put on a show to fool the enemy here for a few days, and then we shut it down, and we go someplace else.
There was no time to lose. This was early 1944. D-Day was just a few months away.
So by and large, they take pre-existing U.S. Army units and kind of put them together Frankenstein style to make this new body.
Young recruits, including Bernie Bluestein and Seymour Nussenbaum, were suddenly sent to a new training camp in Tennessee. Not all the recruits were artists. Some had other creative and technical specialisms.
My name is George Dramis. I'm 97. I'll be 98 next month. And I was born in a little town called Ashtabula, Ohio, up on Lake Erie. I was interested in radio as a kid. I used to read radio books, and I used to build little kits and stuff. I was nuts about radio.
Generally dry day on Wednesday.
When Dramis joined the armed forces, he took a skills test.
Apparently, I must have looked pretty good because they shipped me all by myself to a special signal battalion in Mississippi. Somebody came along and said, "Pack up your stuff, Dramis, you're pulling out. What the hell am I going?"
The answer was that he was going to Tennessee to join the 23rd Headquarters Group, the Ghost Army. Once formed, the men of the 23rd were sent to Britain for further training. Just after the D-Day landings in June 1944, they were sent on to France to begin their work in the field.
We eventually were loaded on a boat. We floated in the channel for about a week, getting shot up at night. Germans would come over and drop these parachutes with lights on them, magnesium flares, would light up like daylight, and they would bomb, and you'd see ships go down sometimes, and a lot of shrapnel flying.
The Ghost Army was the first unit of its type in the US military. There was no training manual. Instead, once they landed in France, the men had to improvise. One of their innovations was to improve how dummy tanks were made. In the past, these had been carved out of balsa wood, light but bulky. Bluestein's team hit upon something new.
It was going to be made out of rubber and all. It would have air valves like a bicycle tire, And all we would have to do is to inflate it with air and so-called blow it up. It's not as bulky. This was just a little package. You could load it on a truck and easily get it off the truck and then inflate it.
People used to ask me, what did you do in the war? So I said I blew up tanks. Okay, that's a reasonable answer because you can take it two ways, but they would never take it the way that, blow them up with an air pump.
These new inflatable dummy tanks made it easy for the Ghost Army to cover up real troop movements.
For instance, if they had a bunch of tanks, we would come in with our dummy tanks, and the real tanks would move out. This was usually done at night, and the dummy tanks were inflated in their place, so that when morning came around and any German reconnaissance planes or spies on the ground were looking around, essentially they saw the same thing they saw last night, except the real tanks were somewhere else.
George Dramis was part of the new radio unit. His first task was to jam the Nazis' radio signals.
Just break up their communications. If it was Morse code, it was just a matter of hitting the key so that the signal would be mixed up, so that the guy that's receiving the message on the other end, the German, wouldn't be able to copy too well because we'd have the key down most of the time, just making racket. Or if it was a voice communication, you could talk or yell or whatever. Just make noise so that they can't hear one another. Sometimes we'd be dialing up and we'd hear the Germans talking. We could pick up the guy that's the forward observer and is giving coordinates for artillery fire. And boy, you want to jam him right away quick so that he couldn't give the coordinates back to their artillery.
Dramis studied the radio signals and communication styles of other Allied units so the Ghost Army could imitate them. Designed to trick the Nazis with disinformation, this became known as spoof radio. Early on, the Ghost Army realized that good audio was essential to the illusions they were creating.
So they recorded a massive sound effects library, and they brought that to Europe with them. And then for any particular deception, they could mix sounds together to kind of create the narrative.
We had a unit that had a number of 500-pound speakers that had to be cranked up that were very powerful and had recorded sounds of actual troop movements and tank movements and truck movements, and you'd hear noise, you'd swear to God that a whole unit was moving in someplace. You'd hear all the chatter, everything.
At the Army Experimental Station, located at Pine Camp in Upper New York State, specially qualified men are taught a highly specialized type of warfare, sonic warfare.
In a secret training film made around 1944, the US Department of War demonstrates recent technological advances to deceive the enemy.
The best loudspeakers for the military requirements have been developed. Under ideal conditions, over water, they were found capable of projecting sound for 15 miles.
It has a kind of a psychological impact. You can imagine an enemy soldier in a listening post along a river, hearing sounds across the river of massive numbers of tanks moving in, of men starting to set up a camp. Well, it's going to be really convincing, and he's going to maybe start to imagine that he can even really see this.
During the summer of 1944, as Allied forces advanced into France, each part of the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops was developing its tactics. But the big challenge would be to combine all of these elements into a grand illusion. In September 1944, the unit were camped just outside Paris when they received orders to move. The American General George Patton and his Third Army were aggressively pushing the Nazis back eastwards.
He's gotten to the Moselle River along the borderline between France and Luxembourg on one side and Germany on the other, and he's attacking the fortress city of Metz.
General Patton knew that concentrating his forces on Metz was a risk. It would leave a vulnerability exposed. A 25-mile section of his line protected only by a small unit of light tanks.
If the Germans figure that out, they can come in and get behind Patton and wreak havoc. So Ghost Army to the rescue. The 23rd headquarters is notified by evening the next day. They're pulling in to their positions in Luxembourg.
The Ghost Army had to imitate an armoured division, making the Nazis believe that the Allies were reinforcing this part of the line until a real infantry unit could get into place. This was Operation Bettemborg. It was a huge task. Around 500 men somehow had to pretend to be 8,000, complete with artillery, vehicles, and all the military materiel that a division would be expected to have. For the Ghost Army, it was showtime. They started on the first night with audio recordings.
We would play these sounds from the speakers on the trucks that sounded like troop movement. Sounded like there were all kinds of tanks and all kinds of equipment moving on the ground.
By the next morning, they had inflated their dummy tanks. Should any German planes fly over, they would see these, corroborating the evidence that an armoured division was in the area.
They had inflatable trucks, they had inflatable jeeps, inflatable artillery of every description. They had inflatable airplanes, and they would set up fake runways with fake airplanes parked next to them.
The radio unit sent out a barrage of fake messages. If the Nazis were decoding them, they would detect a major mobilization of American troops.
And on the ground, they developed this fourth kind of deception, and they called it special effects or atmosphere.
The army trucks that carried the troops were large, empty trucks with one long bench along each side of the truck inside, and it was covered with a tarpaulin. And so just the back end was open. So we would put one or two men on the back end because you couldn't see into the truck. You couldn't see how many people were in there. Then we'd go driving around the city. It was, play acting.
The guys would shift positions in the back, move to the front, move to the back, looked like different guys were there, change the driver a little bit. So it always looked like there were new people all the time, lots of people. Well, it could be just a few trucks doing this whole maneuver. I mean, it's fake is what it is.
The visual deception unit painted the vehicles with the insignia of the unit they were impersonating. They even created fabric patches with the colours of the unit, which were carefully sewn onto their uniforms.
So that when we circulated in town, we would look authentically like these people.
Sometimes the Ghost Army soldiers would encounter locals who might pass information to the Nazis. This meant each man had to create a full backstory for himself.
If you said you were from Chicago and you didn't know some of the things that were in Chicago, then they would get suspicious. So you learned a little bit about that before you went into town. It was a good acting job.
Operation Bettemborg was only meant to last for 3 days, but the real unit it was supposed to cover for was held up, so the Ghost Army kept up appearances for a week. At last, the real infantry unit arrived. To the tune of their pre-recorded sound effects, the Ghost Army stood down. Patton's line had held. Operation Bettemborg proved how effective the Ghost Army's theatrics could be. The thing about imitating heavily armed forces, of course, is that it made these men very real targets.
We had some weapons. We had our regular weapons, but they were of no use when you're being shelled. We had no equipment to return to shell fire.
We were strafed by low-flying German planes while we were on convoy, and we had to jump out of the trucks and jump into the ditches along the road. One guy that was right next to me in the ditch by the side of the road, he looks at me, he says, "Jesus, a guy can get killed around here."
The irony of it all wasn't lost on Bluestein. The better he did his job, the more he was in danger.
Here's the guy that didn't want to be in the army because he didn't want to shoot a gun or have any Germans shooting at him, and I'm out there waving at them or saying to them, "Here I am, I want you to shoot at me." A couple of my friends got hit, they got injured. I was lucky. When that happened, we all kind of stood there and applauded a little bit. Applauded because we knew that was a good sign of our success.
Rick Beyer has tried to piece together the cost of the Ghost Army's work.
We think that they probably took some kind of artillery fire in at least 8 or 9 of the deceptions that they carried off. And in one terrible day, Operation Bouzonville, they had 2 soldiers killed and dozen soldiers pretty seriously injured by enemy artillery fire. And that's why, one of the soldiers said, that when the mission was described to them, they said, oh, it sounds like a suicide mission.
Well, I think sometimes some of the guys thought, what the hell are we doing here? I mean, there's a real war going on, and we're playing fake. I mean, I think some guys maybe felt like, sometimes I felt that way myself. Are we really doing anything worthwhile here?
In March 1945, as the Allied generals prepared to cross the Rhine, troops gathered on the banks of the Great River. The Ghost Army was sent to the district of Viersen. By now, they had carried out 21 missions.
They've gotten really good at what they do. And that's a good thing because now they are going to face their biggest challenge, their last big show. And they have to convince the enemy that these 2 divisions are going to be crossing the Rhine and attacking the Germans in one place, when in fact they're really going to be crossing the Rhine 10 miles to the north. They play sound effects multiple nights in a row. They've got phony radio networks. They've got multiple phony headquarters, people impersonating high-ranking officers. They are doing everything they can. They are, figuratively speaking, waving their arms as widely and as high as they can to say, it's coming from here, it's coming from here.
While the Ghost Army was performing their show, the 30th and 79th Infantry Divisions were 10 miles away, preparing the real advance.
And when the 9th Army actually crosses, they do so with really a handful of casualties, a few dozen casualties, and it's far less than what they expected. The intelligence officers working for the 9th Army basically credit the success of their crossing to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops, to this massive deception that went on. They're not John Wayne soldiers going into battle with their guns and leaping, over the trenches or throwing bombs into the tanks or whatever. But what they're doing is really important, and it's believed that this deception all by itself probably saved thousands of lives.
It was a remarkable success for the Ghost Army. They had turned deception into an art form and laid the way for the Allies to go on to victory. On the 22nd of March 1945, General Patton's forces crossed the Rhine. The following day, Field Marshal Montgomery launched Operation Plunder. The Nazi forces were pushed back and back. On the 25th of April, the first physical contact was made between American forces and their Soviet allies. 5 days later, with the Red Army just blocks away from his bunker in Berlin, Adolf Hitler killed himself. Germany surrendered on the 7th of May, ending the war in Europe. After the war, many Ghost Army veterans returned to civilian artistic careers. Nussenbaum and Bluestein both became designers.
And some of these artists went on to become famous. So you've got Bill Blass, the fashion designer, Ellsworth Kelly, the famous minimalist painter and sculptor, Arthur Singer, who became a world-renowned wildlife artist.
All these celebrated men had once been part of the unit, yet the story of the Ghost Army itself was quickly deflated and packed away, like one of their own dummy tanks.
The official history of this unit was kept classified until 1996, and most of the soldiers were told not to talk about it. And so as a result, as the World War II story gets told in the 50 years after the war, this story is left out.
We weren't supposed to tell anybody, nobody. My folks never knew what I did. I really kept it a secret. I locked it out of my mind. I didn't think about it, didn't talk about it up until the middle 1990s.
And I think the reason for that is that the U.S. Army wanted to preserve their deception capability in case they needed to use it against the Russians, in case they needed to use it in the Cold War.
The Ghost Army was turning into an army of ghosts. Finally, in 2022, Rick Byers' work with the Ghost Army Legacy Project paid off. President Biden signed an act awarding the Congressional Gold Medal to the 23rd Headquarters Special Troops.
Oh, it's astounding. I mean, I originally thought, how do I deserve it? I mean, I wasn't out there with a gun shooting Germans, and why should I get one? But I've been convinced that we really had an effect on the war, we really did. The only thing I'm sad about is that there's only about 10 of us left now. I wish that all the rest of these people that were in the same outfit I was in could enjoy this.
So long after their adventures in the war, the veterans of the Ghost Army found each other again.
I had a friend whose name was Seymour Nussenbaum. We were pretty friendly during the service. He was a great guy. I mean, we used to sit in the barracks and chat all the time about it. And after the service, it wasn't until maybe 75 years later, after we were able to tell everybody about what we did and everything, it was released finally. And I got in touch with him, and we've been corresponding ever since. And he's my age, and we have the same problems growing old.
Honestly, I feel it's unreal. I'm appreciative, but it's still unreal. I'm glad that I was in the Ghost Army because we did accomplish our mission. We did save lives, and we lost very few people.
I'm proud of what we did. We did our jobs. We pulled off about 22 missions or so, and they never found out who we were.
Next time on History's Secret Heroes, two eccentric French artists perform an extraordinary act of resistance on the island of Jersey.
It was just impossible for the German command to imagine that these two little women could be behind this big conspiracy, that was spread all over the island.
Claude Cahun, Marcel Moore, and the Soldier with No Name.